Collaborative work really sells.
Few people have said to me several times, Kenny, you've been in Australia for over 8 years now. How come your accent has not changed?
I find that when new arrivals come in here, they're not inquisitive. It is when you open up to say, I want to
Yeah.
learn how things are done here. We somehow place our keys at a place of disadvantage.
My first day in Sydney, on a very cold winter night in June, I was lost. Welcome to Lead the Shift Conversations. This is a space where we explore what it means to grow, evolve, and lead through life's transitions. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Uchechukwu Levi Osuagwu, Associate Professor in Rural Health at Western Sydney University. Levi's work focuses on improving health equity and access to healthcare in underserved communities, particularly across rural Australia and through collaborations in Africa. His research and leadership span public health, IL, chronic disease prevention, and community engaged research. But today, we are less interested in his resume than in the journey, decisions, and experiences that shaped the person behind the work. Welcome, Levi.
Thank you, Kenny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Can you please tell us a little about yourself and the journey that has brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, Kenny, thanks for having me, and good to see this new dimension of your work. I'm really proud of what you're doing. Look,
Thank
like
you.
you said, my full names are Uchechukwu Levi Osuagwu. I'm from the eastern part of Nigeria, from the tribe called Igbo, and I moved to Australia in 2014 for my PhD. Look, I often describe myself as someone who is deeply curious about people and deeply committed to equity. I mean, that's really what drives my thoughts, my idea, my work. As a professional, my background is optometry. And a public health researcher, and I also do some education teaching. But beyond these titles, Kenny, I think I see myself as someone who wants to ask difficult questions about why some communities continue to experience poorer health outcomes than others. Why are there certain races that are not privileged to have similar health care that other people do have? So that sort of made my work to revolve around so many areas. I've worked in indigenous health, migrant health, diabetes, mental health, and eye care. So whether I'm conducting research or sometimes supervising students or developing community programs, my goal always, Kenny, is to make sure that healthcare is accessible, is culturally responsive to the people I serve, and that it genuinely can improve lives of people. Impact really for me is what I want to see. You know, on a family level, I'm also a husband and a father of three beautiful kids. I'm a man of faith. I truly believe in God and I practice Christianity. And for someone who believes that our greatest impact comes when we use our gifts to serve people, that has really made meaning to me growing up. And since then, I think serving people is my greatest asset. And that's just what gives me joy.
7 people is your great asset. Thank you for that. All right, so I'm just going to take you back a bit to when you said you came to Australia in 2014.
Yep.
So, what prompted the move to Australia?
The move was prompted, Kenny, by the desire to really know more. I wanted to learn new things. My move from Nigeria was to Saudi Arabia first, where I worked in a research school in an institution, King Saud University, as a lecturer. That's where my academic career actually started. That's when I started teaching. That's when I started doing research. They made me lead, a research lead, and the people that I lead at that point were all professors. And at some point, my My dean called me one day and said, Levi, you have to go and do a PhD. You're leading all these people, but they all have better qualifications than I do. So I thought, anyway, I think there's time to do this. I've started writing papers, doing research, and I started looking for opportunities where to do research. UK was my first destination at the point. It was my preferred place as well to live. We had gotten our visas, just about to move, and somehow a scholarship came for Australia. We had paid our fees to go to
Mm.
the UK. I lost that money because they couldn't refund that. And we just thought, look, I think Australia gives us a better opportunity to grow our kids, in an
Yeah.
environment where I knew there was a possibility of staying there permanently. So those were the options that we got.
Mhm.
So we took a decision with the family, say, look, these are the plus, these are the negatives. We have to look at what the benefit here. So Australia fared better than the UK. So we took that move. So coming here was for a PhD, and since then we've never regretted that decision because it seems to be the perfect time that we
Perfect.
moved.
That's good. That's interesting. So looking back to my journey when I first came to Australia, I remember that my first week, in fact, my first day
Mm.
in Sydney on a very cold winter night in June, I was lost. I got lost. I missed my way, and and I had to go to the police to direct me back to my Airbnb. So, in saying that, what do you remember most about those early days of settling in Australia? Everyone has a different story, but similar struggles and things like that. So, what do you remember?
Yeah, look, I think it's the way we could it's how we were able to navigate the system because we came with two kids. I had two girls then, and as an international
Mm,
student, my wife didn't couldn't work. She needed to do some other courses to sort of fit into the system.
mm,
So it was navigating the environment. I had to drop the kids in school in the morning. I had to head off to school, come back. So the bus system, going around with kids. We
wow.
didn't have a car for the first 6 months, so you could see, learn how to jump on the train, the buses. How to these things were not things that we are used to at the point. So yeah,
Google
navigating
Maps.
the system was an issue. But again, because we knew that we were here for a positive stay. We were here with the good intentions. We knew
Mm,
the future was going to be better. So we had to really make efforts to learn stuff. There was no induction. The schools provide some
mm,
orientation with, but as a PhD student, I came when he was already
yeah.
done. So I had to ask different questions. Where
Mm,
do I get this? How do I get the bus car? You go to the train station, you ask them questions. So we are really
mm,
asking questions. That's really made it.
mm,
That's what made it easier for me. I find that when new arrivals come in here, they're not inquisitive. Things are hard. But in this
yeah.
society, if you're open to asking questions, you will hear the answers. And that's what we do. We can go to a
Yeah.
Twitter and ask them, sorry, how do we go from Kevin Groove to Wong? Somebody said, look, we don't know. Look at the
Yeah.
card here. You can look at this, the map. We'll go there and look at it. So I think we really did ask questions. That sort of kept us at ease because people were willing to support and direct you, if they knew that you were a migrant and you were looking for maybe things like
Yeah.
that. So that's how we kind of navigated the system.
Yeah, thank you. So I like what you said about speaking up because it's very easy as a migrant to feel that sort of inferiority complex or imposter syndrome where you feel like, okay, I don't want to speak up. But just like me, similar to you, I think I found my voice in Australia because I learned that in a place like this, if you don't speak up, you'll be left behind and you won't find help. Nobody can read your mind. Nobody can understand your struggles if you
Mm.
don't speak up. Yeah, back home in Nigeria or in Africa, the belief is it's better to just, keep your problems to yourself so that your neighbor doesn't know what's going on with you. But I found that that doesn't work here. You need to speak up. You need to find help. Otherwise, you just struggle on your own and it tends to become very difficult in a new country. So yeah, thank you
And
for
the
sharing
other
that.
thing, Kenny, the other thing
What
I just want to mention it because what you just said now kind of rang a bell in my head. If you are here and you don't want to imbibe the culture, it's difficult to be open. I
Mm,
think it is when you open up to say, I want to
yeah,
learn how things are done here. Then you start asking
yeah,
questions. You start listening to the news,
yeah,
asking, I mean, changing your
yeah,
relationships to people that you sort of grow in your
yeah,
own language too. I think the difficulty with people is they are a little bit shy of how do you perceive my English. That's really one of the barriers, the language. I say,
Mm,
okay, I can't even get what they're telling me. But if you make those efforts to
yeah.
listen, life is always easier. People are
Mm.
always ready to listen and talk to you. It's just that we are not that open each time that opportunity comes.
All right. So again, what you said has triggered something in my head. I have an acquaintance, or would I say a friend, that a few people have said to me several times, Kenny, you've been in Australia for over 8 years now. How come your accent has not changed? And whenever they say that, it makes me laugh because why on earth do I need to change my accent? As long as they understand me, I'm a fast speaker. I speak very fast, especially when I'm passionate about a topic or something. I can yap yap yap. But the only thing I've done is when I'm speaking, I just try to make sure that I control my pace, just so that the other person understands what I'm
Absolutely.
saying. But I've not found the need to adjust my accent to be able to fit with the Australian people. So I guess people have different opinions
Yeah.
about that. I wanted to check what your
Oh,
opinion
no,
was about
no,
that.
look, I think it is undermining one's culture to ask one to change their accent.
Mm,
Accent is a cultural identity. The language you speak
mm,
determines what your accent will look like. For instance, if you're born in an
mm.
Arabic speaking country, your accent will often go with the language of speaking Arabic. Their consonants, the way they
Yeah,
pronounce them. And in our culture, there's an adage that an older woman does not learn a new dance at old. You don't expect people like us
yeah,
who have grown in a particular culture to come here and easily change
mm,
our language. It's like changing your accent is changing your language because each time I speak that my language as
yeah,
well, there's an accent to it. So I think it doesn't matter what the
yeah,
accent is, it's being able to understand and pronounce words clearly. In Australia, I learned that
yeah,
they pronounce words to the last T's. Whether the US guys will say words, very fluent without even looking at the way the rhyme tones go. So here you
mm,
need to learn to say, okay, accent is pronouncing and the person will listen to you. They will understand it. It's not that difficult.
yeah,
It's a practice thing. It doesn't change your accent. It just means that
yeah,
you're a little bit aware of the next person you're speaking to. I thought at my
yes,
PhD days, I was teaching students even while I arrived here. You could see how challenging it is because in your class, everybody there is Australian, sort of. They lived in Australia, boy, are born here. So they will
yeah,
want to listen. They want to understand you. How would you fare in that situation when you cannot say things that they can understand? So you have to
mm,
learn to say words the way that people can get it. You may not get everything I say, but sometimes you say, okay, because I've picked majority of the words, I know what Levi is telling me. The same thing happened. I
mm,
had two US students who came. I'll share this with you. I had two US students who came for exchange program in my university, and they lived in a house in a dormitory home with an Australian. These two girls had to leave the house because the roommate was telling them that they don't speak English. These are people who are born in the States. They came to me when they were leaving. We
oh wow,
hosted them in my home, and I asked them, "What was your experience in Australia?" The other one is a black American, the other one is an Indian American, then the other one is a pure white, a blonde girl. They said, Levi, I never knew that I had an accent until I came to Australia. These are guys who were born and bred in the US. That's the only language they knew.
mm,
But they came here and they were also told that they have an accent. So it doesn't really matter whether you speak the English or not.
yeah,
Where you grow up, what language you're associated with, shapes the way that word comes out. So I think you don't need to change your accent at all.
be
Exactly.
yourself. Hashtag be
Just
yourself.
be aware of the next person. That's
All
all.
right, thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, be
Yeah.
aware of the next person. All right. Okay, now going back again to your early days in
Yes.
Australia. So the transition that you experienced, so those changes you experienced, did you expect that or was it different from what you expected? At least you were in Saudi Arabia for a bit,
Mm.
right? So at least you knew a bit of experience living outside of Nigeria. So would you say that the experience in Australia in the early days was expected or more challenging than expected?
Look, I think it wasn't expected because so many things were different here. One example is where the kids had to go to school when we came. We didn't know that the location where you stay determines the access to education that the children will have. There was a school we identified, Kevin Grove State School. We've heard a lot about it. It's closer to my office at the point. We made so many efforts to get our kids into that school. But the answer was no, because we were living at a location that was not
Mm.
in that geographical description at
Yeah,
all. So
the
that catchment
attachment.
area was
Yeah.
off. So we couldn't even get access to that school. So that's when we knew, wow, even while you're moving here, you need to also be thinking about those locations where the schools are, what sort of school it is,
Mm.
and that's sort of where things we did not expect. The other thing I saw that we didn't expect was the fact that in this environment, time is important. Time of the train is
Mm.
important. Time of the bus is important. And sometimes the bus schedules are
Yeah.
30 minutes apart. So if you miss that first bus, your lecture is in the next 1 hour, you may actually miss the lecture.
Yeah.
So we had to learn
Yeah.
these things the hard way, because if it happens to you once, wow, really, I need to be here 10 minutes before time. So those things were not expected. But the
Mhm.
other thing that we expected is we knew that we were going to adjust to a new environment. So we were prepared. We
Mm.
had the finances, so we're not going to be struggling really at that point. We saved up money and
Mm.
said, okay, for the first 3 months at least, we've calculated our rent, we checked online what it takes to
Mm.
live
Yeah.
here. At least that 3 months, we will not be struggling with finances until we have my job. My wife gets a job. And that's how it happened. The same month
Mhm.
we were almost to run out of cash. She got a job and she started working. I had stipend coming from school, so that was a bit of a help to pay, say, for instance, rentals. So I think that's really what happened. We were prepared for that, but it was challenging, because there are just very few people that you can tell your experience and they'll be coming up to support you.
Yes, true, true. So how did those experiences, how did that shape the man you are and the man you are becoming?
Look, I think it was a change in mindset. It was a change in mindset because you kind of understand that when you move out of your country, the only people you have around is your family, are the people you move out
Mm.
with. No other person elsewhere mattered, and because nobody else would come to your
Mm.
rescue if you had an issue at the point.
Yeah.
So we had to trust ourselves. We had to rely on each other. We had to make sure that we understood
Mm.
what we are here for. We had a common goal and we worked towards it. So it made us disciplined. Those experiences also gave us an insight as to how to raise our kids in a culture where it
Mm.
is strange and foreign to them. What we do in our homes are different from what they tell them to do in school. We wanted to make sure that we
Yeah.
communicate those to them. So we talk to them daily. How was your school today? So we can know what they are being taught and how that fits into our own cultural belief and try to marry those two. So they grow up in a society where they understand the culture, but they also know that in our culture, certain things are obtainable and some don't obtain. So it was that sort of trying
Mm.
to bring those two cultures together that was a little bit of a struggle there. So that's one of the things we learned very quickly. I remember my child coming back from school at some point. Then she was in prayer, and she said, "Daddy, I want to change my hair color." We were walking on the street, taking her to school. I'm like, "Why do you want to change your hair
Mm.
color?" She said, "Because everybody in my class has has a different hair color. Nobody has a dark hair like me." Because the
Mm.
location where we were then was mostly, yeah, it was mostly Caucasians and Asians. In fact, there was no African in the school at the point that time. So I said, look, you don't have to change. Your hair color identifies who you are. Because you were a
Yeah.
product of myself and your mom, our hair is also dark. There's
Mm.
no way you will have a gray hair, a white hair, a blonde hair. It's not going to be
Mm.
possible unless you have to change your hair. Because in our lineage, I started telling her, I said, okay, when we come back home, we're going to talk about this more. It was on our way taking her to school. We
Yeah.
came back home and we opened up so many popular artists, world-known celebrities
Mm.
who had the same hair. Serena Williams, Venus Williams. We opened up all those.
Mm.
Said, well, these people. Yeah, these people are like us too. They have the same hair, but they are popular. They are
Yeah.
no, they are doing well. So I said, it doesn't matter the hair color. So okay, daddy, that is very true. Now I understand. That is the
Mm.
process of communication that we learned here. Back home, you don't have this
Yeah.
engagement mostly with your kids. So I
No.
think it was
Yeah.
just sort of short and it was a good platform for all, but we use that platform positively, at least, to make sure that we interact with our kids more often.
Okay. Thank you. And so that story reminds me of my kids. when they first moved to Australia, and so you know how we have the traditional, like the Yoruba names
Mm,
or the Igbo names in Nigeria, and then some parents also go ahead and give them the second name, which may be an English name. And I remember my kids coming to Australia and saying that can I start calling them their
second.
second name, their English name? And I'm like, no, they're going to have to get used to calling you your first name because that's your name. And we believe in the power of names in Africa, where we come from. So your name, your first name, your second name has a meaning. And we've been calling
Mm,
you your first name right from when you were in Nigeria. So why would I come here and all of a sudden start calling you your second name? Your schoolmates, your friends will have to get used to your first name, even though the pronunciation may be
yeah.
quite interesting, but at least they're still calling you your first name. And yeah, so what are your thoughts
Oh,
on that?
yeah. Look, I never knew you're gonna ask me that, but I have a different perspective, and that's because of some of the things that I've
Okay.
seen. So before we moved to Australia, in fact, before we started having kids, I
Mm,
used to watch a lot of documentaries and real life TVs, So I was watching Oprah Winfrey at some point, those his old shows,
mm,
and
yeah.
she had an interview sort of. Play. So she set up a group of popular leaders in different industries to conduct
Mm,
an interview, blinding the interview to who the applicants were. So they stripped off the names of the applicants
mm.
and gave them the resumes of say 10 people to then judge their suitability for this role.
Yeah.
So on that day, the applicants, those who were interviewing people got the panel got the names of people they wanted based on the
Mm,
job description. They wrote down one, two, three, the order they were employed in. They brought them back again and then put the names of those applicants on the resumes and asked them again to grade these
mm,
people. So this set of interview panel graded these people based
mm.
on their personal names. So she now
Yeah.
brought them back and
Bias.
said, look,
Mm,
these were the same individuals you looked at their resume. Why did you change? Why did you change
okay.
what you did in A to B? Why did you change what you did? So these guys were very honest. They said, look, for the role we are employing, he needed somebody who can speak good English, someone who knows the
Mm,
American culture, who's able to interact with people.
yeah.
And from the first name of this person I see, it sounds Asian. It sounds like an African. So I'm asking myself,
Mm,
how do I pronounce it? Was this person able to represent what this job is about?
mm.
So they had a bias. That's what I'm trying to reason. Because of
Yeah.
the name that they've seen. That name
Yeah.
led them to a particular
Yeah.
conclusion, that then sort of came ahead of the job description, sort of for them. And when they did
Yeah.
not have that
Yeah.
name, their judgment was different. I sat back and I asked myself, wow, you know what it taught me? They
Mm.
said, we somehow place our kids at a place of disadvantage already, even
Disadvantage.
before
Yeah.
they are being birthed. We already given, and in society, if
Mm.
you're planning to travel, that's a big determinant. Because if your kids are applying to say a job position and you're not seeing the applicant, you just see the
Mm.
resume. These days, some people put photos to the
Yeah.
resume. That's different. But now, maybe they are born in Australia,
Mm.
but they still answer Uchechukwu Levi Osuagwu.
Yeah.
Just by seeing that, I say, this person
Yeah.
wants to be our business strategist. This is not an Australian. How would they understand? You're trying to think about this while you're judging
Mm.
the resume. So that's when I told my wife, I said, hold on. If you have a child, she was of the opinion that he has to have a traditional name. I said, yes. You give the traditional name, I will give the
Mhm.
English name. I want all my kids to have
Mm.
one because I'm planning to travel. I don't want to go out and then
Yeah.
start to explain to my kids why they have to not get a job that they were rightful, when they are qualified to get that.
Mm.
That's what changed my perspective. So I do see where you're coming from. But again, if I look at it
Mm.
in that field, when I'm not there, but my application is ahead of me, how does that hinder
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opportunities? That's the reason why I had to do that.
Yes.
So all my kids have got traditional name,
Yes.
English name, and their surname.
Yes. All right. Thank you for sharing that. And that's one of the reasons why I started leadership conversations because I've had leadership for a year now and it's been my experiences, research backed insights. But I know it's important to also hear from other people, lessons they've learned over time and also their experiences as well. Like I'd never actually seen it from this perspective. So it's important for people to ask questions and never assume that, they've got it all figured out because, somebody else may see it from a different perspective. And something else I picked from what you said is, as an individual, it's important to think
Yeah.
long term, not just short term thinking. Okay, you started to think about, okay, I want to travel in the future, even though at that time maybe you
Yeah.
didn't even know you didn't even have what you needed to travel, but you knew that it was your desire to
Exactly.
travel, you wanted to travel, and you were already preparing and planning ahead for your children based on that. So it's important for people to start to think long term and start to make arrangements for those future plans. I guess that's what I
Yeah,
picked
yeah.
from what you
What else?
said.
That's just perfect, and that's what I do. Like for now, I do. So each time I have an idea, I write it down. Maybe that idea is in the next 5, 10 years.
Mm,
I don't know when it's gonna mature, but it's my idea. I don't want to forget it. I put it down. So the kid's name, that's the same thing. My
mm,
first child, I wrote the name already on paper. This is what I'm gonna call this
mm.
person. And my
Wow.
wife's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's the name I've chosen." And I just do it because it just
Mm.
makes me look like I'm prepared for that opportunity. So
Yeah.
it's more like an instinct thing for me.
All right. Thank you. That was an interesting insight that you've shared. Okay, so going to Anna, you are the convener of Anna. What spurred you like to set up or to start the
Now,
network?
Anna, I'm not the convener of Anna. That's what people don't really understand. I am not.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
So Anna was convened by few other guys. There's Obed. There's one guy Frank Bafo. There's another Nigerian boy named Emeka. I think
Mm,
there were three or four of them. Anna has started
mm.
before I think before I came to Australia. But it's a small
Oh,
group of few
wow.
people who wanted to work together. And somehow it did not really take off. They had started and somehow it died off
Mm,
again. There was a professor as well who was part of it. I had to look into that story because there was a time I presented about Anna to a meeting. So
mm,
there's somehow somebody connected Obed to me. I think one of my friend Emeka said, "Look, you need to speak to this guy because he thought I was going to be a good team for them." So he came and told me the story and what they're
mm,
trying to do, and I bought the idea. That's when I came into Anna, and from that point, it's people think is convened by Levi. No, I didn't. I came into it
ah,
when it was already there, but it wasn't as productive as what we have now. So we had to re-strategize.
mm,
We had to write a constitution. We had to go back and register the association. I was part of that process. So that's when Anna really kicked off. Was the point at which we had a come. Man, Obed visited my house and told me about this stuff and how it was almost going to go down. So I said, look, no, this is a great idea. The fact that you guys have started these
mm,
things as well means that we can do this better. That's when we started thinking about writing stuff on my house, started notes what we want to do, how we want to do it, and who do we bring on board
mm,
and stuff like that. So I think that's how it started. But again, it is mostly because we want to work together as Africans. We think
mm.
in academia here, people work in groups and collaborative work really sells what you do here. Australia likes
Yeah,
teamwork. You have to collaborate with people. And what is the safest place for us to collaborate if not working with our own persons? So in our community, there are people
mm,
who may not actually feel safe working with other people for things that they think they don't know. But in Anna, whether you're an expert in it or you're not an expert, there's always somebody who can who can work with you, who will be able to persist, to sort of persevere, listen, patient, with the way you do stuff. The African
yeah.
thing is very different. So that's how that organic idea sort of kind of kicked off. And we thought if we work with each other, then we can elevate each other's profile. And from that point, who knows? It could be promotion, it could be publication, it could be learning together, mentorship, and all those ideas sort of came up. And that's how Anna kind of kicked off for us.
Okay, so for in one sentence, I know you've already touched it, but for those that are not aware of, what Anna is and what Anna does, so what is Anna and how can researchers, African researchers, benefit from Anna?
So, Anna is a safe space for anyone who is of African descent and is into academia. So it could be a lawyer, it could be somebody in justice health, it could be somebody in social work, you could be working in health, you could be working in business. Once you are in academia, Anna is a place to be. And it's only for those who are based in Australia as well. We had that debate before. We don't accept people who are not in Australia. If you finish your PhD here, you've gone back
Yeah.
to your country, you can still collaborate with Anna, but Anna is missing if you're living in
Yeah.
Australia. So joining Anna is
Okay.
easy. If you have have a website now, a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, just message us. If you message us, they will send you a link to a form, and that form is to register for free. We don't charge you fees for registration. But the caveat is every year there's an annual dues of $50, minimum annual dues. Some people pay
Mm.
more than that if they want to contribute to what we do, and they can pay more, but minimum is
Mm.
$150. And we're not mandating everybody to do that. We just think that we should own that space as ours. And if you commit to
Support.
it,
Yeah.
you kind of feel that you belong here. So that's the whole essence why we had that
Mm.
dues of $50 as a flat rate for everyone.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So, moving on. When you look back over your journey, what shift has most shaped who you are today?
That's a big question, Kenny. Look, my journey has been important, and there have been so many turning points. I didn't arrive here by accident. I had thought about what my future would look like. So, growing up, Kenny, I saw enormous differences in opportunities that are available to different people. In my class,
Mm.
then when we were in school, there are people who came from very wealthy background. There are people who already had international passports, people who already were citizens of different countries. So their path was already clearer to them. I realized early in
Yeah.
life that having a talent is universal. Anyone can have a talent, but the opportunity is not universal. You have to place yourself
Yeah.
at a particular position where the opportunity comes to you. So that observation stayed with me for a long time. So as I entered into healthcare and later into research in Saudi Arabia, I found myself continually asking questions as to, for example, it's not just what a disease a person has is but why are certain communities, certain people facing this condition in a disproportionate manner? So that question really shaped my research. It shaped my thinking about things that these days I'm not just doing research for publication purpose. I'm doing
Mm.
research with a question as to how would this impact the community that I'm working on? How do we use this to change people's life? I think that particular thought as to seeing that personalities can differ, we have all our diverse opinions, but opportunities are always there when you properly position yourself. I need to make
Yeah.
sure that I have the education that I need. I meet the right people that I want to meet. I'm in the places where I should be. I attend events where I can connect with those people. So that
Yeah.
intentional move is what placed me where I am today. And that's really what I think has changed the whole thing for me.
Mm. Yes, because it's important to set yourself up for success. Things don't just, yeah, sometimes things can just fall on your lap, but it's not very common that these things fall on your lap. So you need to prepare yourself so that when that opportunity comes, you can be ready to grab that opportunity. It could be in form of learning a skill or volunteering within reasonable limits. And yeah, networking, putting yourself out there. For those that say, okay, I'm not the outgoing kind of person. If you want to meet people, you can't meet them from your couch. I'm that kind of person. I'm trying to push myself out too as well. You can't meet new people or net or connections from
No,
your
you can.
couch.
You
You
can.
have to go out.
And I will tell you, yes, I think 2 days ago I was at the African what is it called? AAAC African Australian Advocacy
Yeah.
Center in Sydney. And I was speaking to a group of interns who are all international students. And I remember when I asked them, I said, look, how have you ever experienced a downtime while you're in Australia? All of them raised their hands. I say, even me, because it's a challenging place
Mm.
when you're coming from your own country. But I told them, do you know what? They said, so
Yeah.
what changed the journey for? I said, what changed the journey for me was believing that anywhere that I find myself today, I'm there for a reason. So look, my background is optometry.
Yeah.
I came here as a PhD, doing stuff in public health now. It wasn't something I thought about earlier. If I told
Mm.
me before while I was in
Mm.
school that I'm going to be a research person, I'll tell you no. Because I was mostly, I like clinical work. I like consultation. I was good at it. I wasn't seeing education as something that was cut for me. But each time I found myself in any place, I put in my best 110%. It doesn't matter whether I like the job, it doesn't matter whether that's where I want to be, but for the fact that someone has placed me there, I give it everything I can.
Mm.
Because at that point, that could be where I meet my destiny. You just don't know. And
Yeah.
I said the point, if you knew your destiny now, I would have left Nigeria when I finished high school. If I knew that Australia was my
Mm.
destiny, why do I channel to
Yeah, that
Saudi
could
Arabia?
be.
Why do I channel to UK? I'll come
Yeah.
straight to Australia and spend the whole of my time here.
Right.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows. But your
True.
pathways, if you believe in God, they are channeled and paths. God is directing that. You could go
Yeah.
different route, but at some point, if you put in your whole best, be positioned in a place where you should be, get the education you need, do the things you need to do, write the papers you need to write if you're looking for PhD, do those groundwork and get yourself ready. It will happen. And that, I think, is what changed the journey for me.
Mm. Okay. Thank you. And it makes me think about I don't know if flexibility is the right word or being
Adaptable.
adaptable. Some people are set in their ways or how they have this vision in their head and they just want to stick to it. I recall like 5 years ago, I came into Australia
Mm,
8 years ago for a master's in
yeah.
human resources. I've worked in human resources as a professional in Nigeria for over 10 years. I had a bachelor's in business administration where I specialize in human resources. Um, I was chartered in CIPM in Nigeria, so everything human resources. And then I came to Australia to do a master's in human resources. And everything I was learning, I'm paying so much as an international student.
Yes.
I'm sure you're
Yeah.
very aware and things like that. But everything I was learning, I already knew. But then I have a friend who kept saying to me, Kenny, you need to change your course. You need to change your course. I'm like, no, God brought me here for a purpose. God, if God wanted me to change my course, God won't have allowed
Mm,
me to,
yeah.
apply for a
Yeah.
master's in human resources. But after so much, dragging here and there, and I started to get some reasoning about, okay, you've studied human resources, you've worked there for how many years? I think it's time for you to try something else. And that's how I, sort of had a career change rather, and moved into business
Mm,
information system. And I would say that I've never regretted it for one day because I actually love it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's important to also be flexible, be adaptable to change. Times are changing, seasons are changing, even with
yeah.
technology and, the constant, you know, um, uplift in
Yeah.
technology, things are changing. So if you're just set in your ways and you don't want to move, it's hard for you to,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's very hard.
you're very correct. And it's even more important if you're a migrant. In your country, you can
Yeah,
decide to stick to your guns. This is what I want to do. Want to do. But
yeah,
when you move countries, you really need to know that adaptation and flexibility come hand in hand. You may have to do some
yeah,
menial jobs to survive. Those menial jobs could be how you start your own business. You don't know. You may have to work
yeah,
in certain professions just because that's where the opportunity comes. It could be where you own your expertise. And what you're saying just made me
yeah,
think about a time during my PhD. So I was the representative for the higher degree research students in optometry. So they chose me to represent optometry school for all the HDLs. So we meet vice chancellor once a month to talk about issues. So we're sort of student representatives. And one of the meetings they organized for that leadership group, the VC was there, the deputy vice chancellor, head of research. So they were talking about PhD being an expert field. So when you have a PhD, you're an expert in that field. And that's the reason why most people do. Though they were sharing their opinion. And it got to a question, they were asking us to ask questions. I said, look, I rose up my hand. I said, look, uh, I understand that PhD makes you know a particular field more. But if PhD was a way of being a specialist in one particular field, I wouldn't do it. They said, I see, because I don't
mm,
need to be expert in what I'm doing now. I know it, but I'm doing
yeah,
PhD because I can transfer that knowledge to any area I find myself to. Say, look,
yeah,
my field that I'm
yeah,
working on now is peripheral vision. I don't see this field progressing after my PhD. I don't think I'm going to do this after PhD, but I'm enjoying it now. So what I'm doing is while I'm doing it, I'm learning the skill set to do research, to ask questions, analyze
Yeah.
data, think critically. I'm learning those things because once I
Yeah.
move here, I can take those knowledge to
It's
anywhere
transferable.
I want to work. I can
Mm.
work in clothing industry, in textile industry. I can work in public health research. The point is, can I think about this and research properly, know the steps to do research, and ask the right questions?
Mm.
That's all I need. The room was shocked. I mean, students were like, say, if it was an expert field, I won't be here. That's not my reason for doing PhD. And I'm sorry, I don't
Mm.
believe that's the way PhD. Some people will do it, but for me, that's not why I'm doing PhD because I want to learn how to ask questions and chat a way to answer them.
Mm.
That's what I need to get from here. So I think it's good to understand those flexibilities has to be there. You may not be working in that field where you've had
Mm.
20 years of experience. It could be somewhere else. So the beauty of life is being able to translate that knowledge that you have from one field to the other. You may have to
Mm.
do some reading, you may have to do some research, but that is skill we learn along the way.
All right, thank you. So looking back at your journey, even before you moved to Australia, would you say you had some mentors or habits or communities that made a difference in your life?
Yeah, look, I did. I was fortunate at each point where I had a turning point in my career. There was somebody there who had either spurred me to think about it or had connected me to the opportunity. So, and those have been the game changers for me. And luckily, I didn't know any of these individuals. I'll tell you a story. From Saudi Arabia, I went to a child dedication. And then I was working with a private company and I met this individual. He's a professor in optometry. He was there for that. That was either my 2 weeks in the country. I wasn't even that old. So I went with these guys to this. I didn't know who was celebrating. They just said one optometrist didn't try the if I didn't want to come. I said, of course.
Mhm.
I jumped in and they drove us to the place. And I met this young lad. He's an optometry professor. In fact, he's one of the youngest professors I knew at the point. He was in Saudi Arabia working as a university lecturer. That's where we connected. And this guy became my very close friend from that point onwards till date. He was the one who then connected me
Mm.
to a university job. That's where my academia started, my whole research in academia. I worked with him as my
Mm.
mentor and his research assistant, and that changed the whole story for me. The same thing when I did my master's in the UK. We went to carry with young guy, Professor James Wolfson from the airport, coming to the school because he was giving a guest lecture. And I was one of those who went to bring him from the airport. While we were driving him to his hotel room, he was talking about this master's they started recently in Aston University. I went to him, I'm like, this guy is talking about it. I want to do a master's. And after his lecture one of the days, I called him and said, can I register for this master? He said, yes, you can. This is our first cohort. You can register. I said, okay, do you have the fees? I said, yes, I can save the money. It cost me £20,000. But you don't have to pay it once. I had to pay it in installments. So I was working and studying my master's at the same time. That's how I connected to this master. I was the first international student to do that master's the first year it started. And I finished that master with a
Mm.
distinction. That connection was because I listened and I thought this was for me. And I chose the opportunity to do it. I spoke to him, he said, yeah, he became my supervisor for the master's project. We published papers together
Mm.
today from that relationship that we built. The same thing happened when I came here in Western Sydney. The same thing. I went to a conference, met one ophthalmologist. I was presenting a poster. He came to me, talked about indigenous health. I said, look, I'm interested in this field. He called me in the next few days to come to his clinic, and then he employed me to be a staff. That's how I got into indigenous health. We traveled
Mm.
across Queensland doing some surgeries. I supported him. I became his assistant in the clinics. So these
Mm.
opportunities are there. So each of those times, there's been somebody who has served as a mentor to either connect me to opportunity or talk to me about what I need to do. And I don't fail to seek that. I seek those out myself. There are people I meet today. I say, look, I need to be friends with this person because I like the way they think. I like the way they do things. I like what they are
Yeah.
doing. It's not just a formal mentorship, but I can learn things from them. And from that, we become friends and
Mm.
develop relationships that sort of changes the journey for either me, both of us, or just me alone. So, but there's always somebody who is there at some point to guide me.
So it's always important to look for those people and
It
learn
is,
from
it
them.
is. And you
Yeah.
you find people who are like you too. You have to place yourself in a position where
Mhm.
you're open to learning. You're humble enough to
Yeah.
know that I need to learn from this person, even though you may think you're better, but there's something about this individual that you need to learn from and connect with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's also important as well within your circle that you again, that's what
Mm,
works for me. I always try to ensure that within my circle, I'm not, I don't want to use the word best. I always like to move with people that are doing, are more experienced than me or better than me in certain ways. Obviously, everybody
mm,
has their strength and
mm,
their weakness, but it's important to, because the moment you find that you are the, maybe you are the highest standard within your circle, pride sets in and then you start to get comfortable. But then when you start to move with different people at different stages in their
mm.
career and life, it sort of motivates the average human being. Me, I don't know, but it sort of motivates you to strive harder because you are seeing someone somewhere you would like to be, or you see yourself in the next few years, and it challenges you to strive to do better rather than settle for less because you are doing better than everyone
Yeah, I mean,
around you. That's
you're
what
very correct,
I
and I
think.
think that's why I said you attract who people that have similar attributes like you. You know, you attract people like
Mm,
even those who are at a better place than you are in terms of a career journey. You also attract them because of
mm,
who you are, because of the qualities you possess. So you have to make sure that you're placing yourself
mm,
at a position where those people will want to talk to you. You know, they want to relate with you because they are also looking for people that they can learn from. So everybody's on that journey. You know, so if you're
yeah,
coming to them and you have this attitude
yeah.
that they cannot relate with you, you lose it. You have to make sure that that position, if it means maybe
Mm,
you're meeting a professor who does work in social sciences, can you have a discussion? You know, what do you bring to the table in that discussion? You may be the lower person there, but
yeah, be
what
informed.
skill set do you bring on board? You need to be positioned in a place where you bring value
Mm,
and then they add the value on what you have. You know,
mm,
so the same thing with working people. I work with people who may be considered on the lower end of their career, at the upper end, but each of that time, I look for people who bring value in different things. The young person brings value, the middle person brings value, the older person brings value. Then we bring this together. It's an organic relationship. So I think you have to always know what do you bring to the table when you're trying to look for those mentors. You also want to bring something because they learn from you too. They get something from. I told you about those mentors. We publish papers together today. I initiated them, but I
mm,
know they're experts. I ring them to say, look, do you want to work with me on this paper? Because they know that I'm going to seek for them when the opportunity comes. They want to work with you. So there's
mm,
always it's a bi-directional relationship, you know.
mm. All right, thank you. And you talk a lot about how you served or worked with the indigenous community, right? So you spend much of your career working to improve health equity for undeserved communities. Do you think your own journey has shaped the empathy that you bring to that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It has. And finding myself in indigenous health for me was a destiny. Well, a destiny cut out because uh, uh, everything about me is about people. So when I see people,
Mm,
I see behind them the story. And that meant that working in digital space was quite easy because I was patient to listen to stories. I was understanding, I showed
mm,
empathy, I showed an understanding of what is happening in the community. And at one point, even
yeah.
when we went to one of the communities, one guy came and he was supposed to have injection in the eyes. And the ophthalmologist is a white guy. And this guy said, no, no, I don't want this person to touch me. I want this black to touch my eyes. I wasn't supposed to because it wasn't my skill set there, but I could do the first part of consultation. He needed to move to the next room to be seen by this guy, and he refused. So I sat him down and said, look, man, we look the same. I hear you. I understand the pain. I know what your story
Mm,
is. I know why you don't want this person to see. So
yeah.
this person is here because he wants to support you. That's why he left where we stay in Queensland. We're not in the community because
Mm,
he wants to work with you. He wants to make you better. So if you
yeah.
trust me, you will trust my boss. He works with me. The guy
Yeah.
looked at me, black fella. Okay, that's I can allow that to happen. So sometimes I understood the pain, I understood the story. And it's good to also hear people's story because when they say things are not working well,
Mm,
there's always something behind it. You know, so Indigenous health really showed me the inequities in healthcare in almost everything about life. You know how the community
mm,
is faring today. When they say poor health, there's a reason why there's poor health. You know, and that is what really changed my whole idea about health. You know, I see health now from a point of view that everybody, irrespective of your color, your status, should have the same
mm.
opportunities to health, education,
Yeah.
access, like any other person should. You know, but that's not the way it's happening at the moment. So that's why my research is always about impact. How many people can we change lives by just doing this research? You know, how does it contribute to that knowledge and opens the space for dialogue for people? And that changes the way I see research as well.
Your story and experience is very interesting. There's a lot to learn from there. Okay, so what do people often not see about your journey?
Yeah, Kenny, look, the people don't see that I'm a man of faith. I think that's what people don't really actually see. I believe very strongly in God. And I believe that
Mm,
whatever I decide to do today, that God already knows about it. So
mm,
I'm a very strong Christian in the way I practice Christianity. I don't get moved around by the artificial things that happen. But each time something happens to me, I kind of feel that it's going to happen. So, and
mm,
people don't know that that's how big, how strong my faith is. And I'll tell you something that's really struck my wife too. So when we had our first baby, we struggled to have our daughter. After 2 years of marriage, and it wasn't really happening. And I left for Saudi Arabia. She wasn't with me. While I was working in Saudi, she was in Nigeria. I was listening to this preacher, this United States preacher, TD Jakes, and he was talking on
oh,
the
okay.
on the TV. I watched his program then, and that day he said, if you sow a seed of faith today and ask God for something, it's going to happen in 2 weeks. He gave 2 weeks
Mm,
hypothetically, but that 2 weeks to me wasn't 2 weeks. But that was the first time outside of my comfort zone I donated to a preacher on the TV. That
mm,
that that changed it. I just said, God, this was speaking to me. I didn't know what it was. I just started making inquiries. How can I donate to this ministry? And at that
mm,
point, what was in my mind is my wife arrives in Saudi Arabia, she's gonna get pregnant. I didn't tell her this. I did that and I was telling God if she arrives here, she'll be pregnant. My wife came, it wasn't 2 months after she got pregnant. Nothing. We didn't do anything
mm,
different. The same thing we've been doing in Nigeria a long time. Nothing happened, nothing changed. But it changed the course for things for me. So that's because I feel it. When things are happening to me and I pray about it, I feel when things need to change. The same thing when we had my last boy, it was 5 years between the second girl and the same thing. It was one day I went to church, they were praying. I don't go out, I don't go for people to pray for me, I pray for myself. That day, God just said, go and
mm,
pray with this pastor. I walked out for the first time in that church after 4 years. I went out and I said, look, I
mm,
want to pray with you. So the guy asked me what my problem was. I told him we are looking for a child and I want God to give us one. I think he just told me to come out and pray. That was what changed. Our game changed from that same day. So each time it's just about, it's our faith. And I think the practice of faith is how close you are to God. It doesn't matter what the preachers tell you on
yeah,
the TV. It's how do you practice it yourself?
yeah.
Do you believe it? Do you act on it? Do you also keep yourself to be in that position where you can receive it? I think, yeah, so people don't know that
Mm.
my faith is that strong because naturally they don't think Levi prays. So the praise is kind of prayer you see in Nigeria, pray
now,
sort of
now
thing, but
you know.
that's
Now
that's
you
who I am.
know. Okay, thank you. Now, because of your experience, being a migrant, being in Australia, and all that you've accomplished and will keep achieving, what advice would you give someone who is starting over in a new country or navigating a major life transition?
Oh wow. So look, I would say don't rush.
Mm,
Growth takes time. And when you compare yourself to others, it steals your joy. And it's very easy to fall into that trap
yeah.
here. And I see that all the time. Australia is a society that is structured. It has a process. If you miss that process by crook, you will come back to start again. So you have to be patient.
Mm,
I think that's one of the big advice I want to tell you. And I think people also need to focus less on competing with each other and more on becoming who they want to be. And because
mm,
everybody's life journey is very different. It's not gonna be like you. And for me, I don't say I'm not afraid to say yes to opportunities that stretch me. Some things I did today,
mm,
somebody has asked me to do it. I've never done it before. I say, yes, I'm going to do it. And I go to do research. I go to think, I watch YouTube. I go to ask myself, how do I do this? and I do it and I do it well. I
Mm.
want to put some excellence to it. So don't be afraid to take those opportunities to lead. Many of us are afraid of leadership because we think, hey, it doesn't give you extra money. Second, it's too much
Mm.
work. But then, how are you gonna change the system if you're not in a place where decisions are made?
So you can
So
make them.
that's
Yeah.
the point. So you need to be able to get out of your comfort zone and think about things differently. And try what it is that you haven't done before. And I think that's my advice. Don't rush it. Take it slow. If you want to grow, you have to grow at a pace. And remember, it takes time. It doesn't just come that way.
All right. Thank you. And my last question for you, which you've already answered, but I'll ask you again. What does lead the shift mean to you?
Leadership, you said. Ah,
Lead the
okay, lead the
shift.
shift. Look, I think for me, when you sent me your stuff, I also thought about that word leadership. And I think leadership for me is also leadership. It's leadership because
Mm.
you want to be the servant that leads people to the right place. Because you can't be
Mm.
a leader if you don't know how to follow people. So if you're leading a sheep, you
Yes.
need to know the pathway that sheep is going to go towards. And if you know the pathway means you've
Mm.
either walked that journey or you've studied how that journey is.
Yes.
So for me, you have to always be ready to serve people because that's the only way you can lead a sheep to where you want the sheep to go to. So for me, it's about new directions. It's about a followership.
Mm.
It's about understanding where the journey takes us to and how that journey is going to be. So if you want to lead the sheep, then become a servant. Because from serving people,
Mm.
opportunities are there for everybody to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your reflections on leadership conversations today. I really enjoyed having you today, hearing your story and learning from your experiences. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Kenny. Thank you for having me too. I
Bye.
appreciate it. All right, take it easy. Okay.
Thank you.